All right, this is Satan's Trilogy, Chapter 1, reading number 4. Hi, I'm wondering if maybe I can help you. It looks like you were waiting for someone before all of this excitement happened. Mary had broken the ice by smiling at the young woman and offering a friendly face. Choosing not to wear makeup, Mary nevertheless was obviously an attractive woman. Her auburn hair had a truly healthy shine. Mary kept it pulled back in a ponytail. Turning herself just a bit in order to look Mary straight in the eyes, the young woman paused for a moment and smiled. Surprisingly, Mary realized the young woman was her exact height, and they stood face to face. The young woman held herself straight and poised. She reached out her hand and greeted Mary. Holding Mary's hand firmly and moving just a bit closer, she said, "My name is Esther Saint. My aunt works here. Perhaps you know her. I was hoping to have a word with her, but the lady at the front desk tells me I just missed her." Amazed at the young woman's grip, as they shook hands, Mary had never felt a woman's hand that was so strong. Putting this thought aside, Mary realized that this was Brandy's niece. It was as if hearing her aunt's name was comforting to her. She then replied to Mary, "Yes, Aunt Brandy is my father's sister. Do you know when she'll return from lunch?" "Brandy usually takes an hour lunch. It seems you arrived just after she had left. Please come with me and we will wait in the employees' lounge for Brandy to return. She shouldn't be much longer." Leading Esther a short distance into a hall, Mary opened a door to the lounge and they both entered. The lounge was on the other side of the wall behind the front reception desk. A large room with a couple of tables placed in the center of the room for people to sit at. "There are seldom more than 2 or 3 people in here at any one time," Mary told Esther. "We have coffee, soda, and water if you are thirsty." "Oh, thank you. Water would be wonderful. I'm afraid that in my rush to meet Aunt Brandy, I had forgotten how thirsty I was." Mary handed Esther a bottle of water from the refrigerator and motioned for Esther to sit at the table. Mary looked at Esther and couldn't help but wonder why she was here and for how long. The words Esther had spoken to the suicidal German were soft enough that Mary hadn't heard them. Mary had so many questions, and yet she knew the answers would have to come slow. It would be rude to drill the young woman with a lot of personal questions, especially having just met. Still, Mary couldn't stop thinking about how fast Esther had managed to move and with such precision as to stop the man from killing himself. Another thing, what had Esther said to the man as the police led him away? Mary understood that the comment was in German, but what was it? "Are you at all shaken by what just happened?" asked Mary. She quickly added, "It seemed like a bad situation for a few minutes. My father took me to Germany when I was only 6 years old. I fell in love with the people, and the towns were wonderful. A friend of my father's helped me learn to speak German. Because of this, I understood the old man was sad and not a threat to anyone except himself. His wife had died and he misses her. I knew there was no risk, but of course, no one else seemed capable of understanding this. I was able to reassure him that his wife would be waiting for him in heaven, but for now, she wanted him to stay and finish his natural life. The man seemed so lost, he was thinking of suicide. I felt very sorry for him. We all have lost loved ones at some time. We're often left feeling empty, and the adjustment is hard on many of us, and yet life must go on." Esther perked up a bit and then added, "My father taught me many things about life, and at the top of the list is that life must go on." Your father must be a very wise person, said Mary. She then added, Your aunt has told me how your father is always writing about how proud he is of you. I can see now why. Offering a soft, appreciative smile, Esther said, Thank you. After a pause and still looking Mary in the face, Esther shared a bit of herself with Mary. My father died 2 months ago. When my Aunt Brandy sees me, she will know this. Mary was lost for words. She couldn't respond to what Esther had just said. Mary had experienced the loss of loved ones too, but for such a young woman to lose her father was heartbreaking. Mary wasn't certain what, if anything, to say. Esther broke the silence. My dad told me many times that Aunt Brandy is family and that if anything happened to me, Brandy and I should take care of each other. Esther's eyes started to shine even more than usual. That's why I'm here. Aunt Brandy and I are going to live together. Esther continued, I've never met my aunt, but if she is anything like my dad, even a small amount like him, then we'll get along just fine. At that moment, Brandy returned from lunch. The long brown curls of her hair were slightly out of place, as was her lipstick. She had a very content look on her face, a rather satisfied look. Brandy was an attractive woman by anyone's judgment. As she entered the room, she saw Esther's profile across the table. Esther turned from Mary, stood up, and smiled at Brandy. Frozen in the moment, Brandy realized that she was looking at her brother's daughter. She recognized her not because she looked like family, but because her brother had described her in letters. A confident and poised young woman with light blonde hair, fair skin, and blue eyes that put the summer sky to shame. In one of his last letters, Brandy's brother wrote, Esther is more intelligent than I dare believe and courageous than my best soldiers. Brandy immediately knew that seeing Esther meant her brother was dead. Without saying a word and frozen in her stance for what seemed an eternity, but was less than a minute, every memory of her brothers flashed through her mind. Their childhood and the challenging years in high school and working alongside of each other was relived in a heartbeat. Brandy had made many poor choices as a teen, and her brother was always there to bail her out from the minor skirmishes. In one of the rare phone calls from her brother, he had asked if she would take care of his daughter should he die before his little girl becomes a woman, and of course Brandy said yes. Esther wasn't a little girl. She looked like an amazing young woman. At a glance, her poise and self-confidence and the way she dressed all showed her to be an independent and capable young woman. A tear eased itself down Brandy's cheek and then her neck. A few more tears ran with them, and then Brandy wiped her cheek dry and said, My brother told me in his letters that one day I would meet a beautiful young woman that would change my life. Her name would be Esther, and we would be the best of friends. Brandy stood gazing at Esther with great pride. Esther walked towards Brandy, and when she reached her, she only paused for a moment. Then both wrapped their arms around the other. Esther felt some of her father in Brandy, and Brandy was holding her brother. Then each felt the bond of kinship that, while invisible, is as real as the sun and stars. Esther knew that despite the terrible news her presence brought to her aunt, she had found herself a new home. Mary was feeling a bit awkward about her witnessing this very personal moment between Brandy and her niece. She wanted to leave but felt trapped by the moment shared with them. Realizing that Esther and her aunt needed a lot of time together to discuss the future as well as the past, Mary made an offer. Brandy, why don't you take the rest of the day off? I'll cover for you. After all, the day is half over, and the two of you have a lot to discuss. I can manage for you. I will explain to Ariel you're leaving." Brandy looked at Mary and for the first time was looking at her as a friend. Her face was somehow different. She had more maturity in her eyes and softness about her face. Mary wondered if this was the same person. How could someone appear to have changed so much in so little time? "Thanks, Mary. I really appreciate your doing this for us." Brandy walked over to Mary and wrapped her arms around her. Mary was stunned and realized that Brandy had become another woman, and Mary was very impressed with her. As Brandy and Esther started to collect their things and move for the door, Esther said, "Wait just one moment for me, Aunt Brandy." She quickly walked over to Mary and hugged her. "Thanks so much for your keeping me company," and then lowered her voice a bit and whispered into Mary's ear, "I need your help. Can you quickly send a good lawyer to the Germans' aid? I want to make certain charges are not brought against him. I'll take care of the costs. Can you do this for me?" Esther then moved back just a little and looked Mary in the eyes, waiting for a response. Nodding just a bit, Mary said, "Of course." For some reason, Mary was about to trust in the guidance of a very young woman. She wasn't certain exactly why, but there was no doubt in Mary's mind that helping Esther was a good thing. Esther gave Mary a kiss on the cheek and said, "We'll be very close friends one day." Taking a step back and giving Mary a big smile, she turned to her aunt and said, "I haven't eaten for 2 days. Perhaps we can find a Chinese restaurant." Brandy smiled, laughed just a bit, and said, "You're talking to the right person when it comes to Chinese food. I know the best restaurants in town." The two walked off. Each had an arm around the other. If life is truly like a book, then these two were starting a new chapter. And that's the end of chapter 1 for book 1.